during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time.
Just about to click over it. Good afternoon, councillors and guests and all the visitors. Welcome to our meeting. Just a reminder for mobile phones, if you have one, if you could switch it off, especially in this room, it does interfere with our recording. And we welcome those that may be listening online. Welcome to you and thanks for joining our meeting. Please be seated. We have no apologies. So declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? No. Someone move the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November. Deputy Mayor, seconder Councillor Spencer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We have no deputations or petitions. We do have a community report from Mr David Dunn, Chairman of the Festivali Committee. David.
Good afternoon, thank you Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Alderman, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk today in relation to what Indulge the Summer Festival for 2021 will look like. Planning for Festivali 2021 commenced exactly 1 week prior to the country going into lockdown because of the COVID requirements, and we were possibly naive enough to think that we could have been the first event to come out of COVID and we would have been running Festivali 2021 as per normal. As we all know, that isn't going to happen. The committee went through a lot of soul searching in relation to what we could or couldn't do, and whether we should even look at, putting the Festivali event into mothballs for a year. So we made the decision that we would, but we needed to put something else on for the city of Launceston and also for the people of Tasmania, and that is where Indulge was born. Why did we do Indulge and what is it? So Indulge will be a celebration of Tasmanian food, wine and produce over the same weekend as Festivali normally would be held, but we're running it over 4 sessions. A Friday night session, which is only has 100 tickets left, a Saturday night session, which is totally sold out, and then a Saturday and a Sunday session, which at this point in time are already over 50% sold out. We decided we needed to go somewhere other than City Park because this isn't going to be a festival as we all know and love. It is a different event. So UTAS Stadium was a standout option for us, and I've got to say that the staff at UTAS have been incredible to work with in relation to getting the stadium or access to the stadium for us and with what we can and can't do out there. It will be unique for a lot of people. A lot of people have been to UTAS Stadium, but very few have ever sat out on the playing field and enjoyed fine wine, food and entertainment, and that's exactly what you'll be able to do at Indulge in 2020. The committee have put a lot of work into making sure that this will be unique and an event for people to remember, and although it won't be the dancing and the party that we all know and love of Festivali, it will be a celebration of all things Tasmanian. I've got to pay tribute to the financial support coming from Events Tasmania, and they've also been incredible to work with in relation to the restrictions that we need to operate under, and also the funding from the City of Launceston. By receiving this funding, it's allowed us to keep the event at a very almost cheap event, if for want of a better word. At $15 a ticket, it really does open up the opportunity for everyone to come along. So the weekend of the Festivali is now going to be indulged at UTAS Stadium. We would welcome you all there, so we hope to see everyone there across the course of the weekend to enjoy a smaller version of what a food and wine festival will look like, but be rest assured that Festivali 2022 will be back in City Park, subject to approval from Council of course, and will be bigger and better than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. Please pass on our congratulations to the committee on taking this action, and I think it should be a fantastic event, so really looking forward to it. So,
thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Alderman.
We have there the public questions on notice from the previous meeting, and then we have public questions without notice. Any public questions without notice? Anyone coming? No. So then we'll move right on. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to the items included in Agenda Item 9 as planning authority. First item is 9.1. We do have some speakers for 9.1. Malcolm Cowan.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. 24 residents of Duke Street have objected to this development application. Residents objected to the original DA on the basis that on-street parking for residents would be an issue. We were told that it would not be a problem because there was adequate parking in the complex for visitors, but from our own experience, we knew this would not eventuate and most visitors will park on the street. The addition of a gate will make this problem worse. We also note that there is also a disconnect between the design and practicality, in that the visitor parking provided for each site is behind a roller door. Did Council understand this from the original application? The view of the site for visitors entering is one of a narrow drive and blind corners. This will discourage confidence in being able to park and turn, resulting in visitors parking on the street rather than taking the chance of parking within the complex. The reconstruction of the street in 2014 has narrowed the carriageway, and so extra on-street parking will create a bottleneck and narrow passing distances. This is seen in nearby Nika Avenue, where cars are parked on both sides of the street, creating a narrow single-lane passage. The gate is operated by a keypad on the gate post, requiring visitors to leave cars to operate the gate and enter the complex. Visitors, particularly casual visitors, are unlikely to bother leaving the car to operate the keypad and will likely park on the street. If there are remote controls for residents, will they be able to activate the gates for visitors from the extreme end of the development? We also argue that the developer has not acted in the spirit of the original design by installing an illegal construction and marketing the development as Duchess on Duke, where life is, a gated community. We object to the implication of a gated community. We have asked the following questions of Council. Why was the structure not included in the original DA? Would the Council and councillors have assessed the original DA differently if they knew it was to be a gated community? How was it possible for occupancy to be approved when there was an unapproved structure on the site? And why can't Council refer to strategies and visions for Launceston's livability when assessing the development applications? Thank you.
Thank you. Becca Biggs, and you're reading out on her behalf, I understand?
Yes, I'm reading a statement from Becca Biggs of 21 Duke Street. If approved, this structure will create a gated community in Duke Street. We argue that a gated community is not in keeping with the open and inclusive atmosphere of the local community and Duke Street in particular. Duke Street is a welcoming and safe community. We have a street Facebook page, a street library and seed exchange outside number 27, which is next door to the Duchess. We run street events and festivities. We share information and care for each other, activities that have been strong assets during the COVID-19 shutdown. A gated community implies that the surrounding community is unsafe and not to be trusted. Duke Street residents are affronted by this implication. The spectre of a fortified compound induces images of rampant crime and a need for protection from theft and violence. There is no privilege protected by the gates, for example, a tennis court or a swimming pool. The gate does not even ensure a physical secure space, as access can easily be gained by jumping over the side and rear fences. The concept of gated communities is in conflict with the City of Launceston's policies and strategies aimed at developing good neighbourhoods. The Corporate Strategic Plan 2014 states that we want to influence the right investment for our city and region. We do this by ensuring that future development and growth of our municipality is managed in a way that enriches and protects that which is important to our community. We believe that a gated community are not important or appropriate for our community. The City believes that developing good neighbourhoods is important to the extent that it runs the Meet the Neighbour program and proposes the vision of Launceston as social, fair and inclusive city. The four key themes of this vision are strong communities, supported communities, connected communities, thriving communities. The introduction of gated communities into neighbourhoods that are proud of their inclusivity and connection will create satellite communities that are isolated and exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Bernarci.
Mayor, Alderman and the public, my name is Michael Bernarci and I'm the architect for this townhouse development at 25 Duke Street, West Launceston. Please note, I do not have this front fence and electronic gates on my original DA as I did not design it. It was of my client's doing. But I'm here today seeking to correct the situation. To the best of my experience and knowledge, I cannot see why this would be denied and seek your endorsement today. Many of the neighbours in Duke Street do raise concerns over these vehicle gates and the displeasure of the gated community idea. Please note, the neighbours submitted the following complaint. A gated community is not in keeping with the open and inclusive community atmosphere of the local community and Duke Street in particular. Please note, I undertook a study within the street. 2A, 3, 5, 8A, 12A, 15, 17, 19, 21, 21A, 24, 26, 28, 30 and special mentions go to 23, the eastern neighbour, and 27, the western neighbour, Duke Street. All have front fences and all have front vehicle gates, none which are electronic. These are 16 residences who most have made the complaints today. These neighbours have in fact created their own individual gated communities on their own property. Further studies of a night time conclude that some of these neighbours close their vehicle gates and park on the street, causing parking congestion. They do not park on their own property, but in the street as well as their visitors park in the street. 25 Duke Street vehicle gates are electronic. Owners have remote controls. Visitors have a keypad to enter the code to open the gates. The owners have a button within the unit to open these gates when visitors arrive also. Also, no other townhouse development in Launceston, to my knowledge, provides one visitor park per dwelling. We're extremely forthcoming and provided far more than what the council requirements were. Also, rubbish collection has been a comment. Rubbish collection will be part of the DA permit, and a private contractor will facilitate their role on site, and no bins will be put onto the street. I hope today to receive your endorsement and approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have for item 9.1. So any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank the speakers that have spoken today, both for and against the motion. I think one of the questions was raised as to whether we would have approved it had the gates been there in the first place. The reality of it is, and when you look through most of the issues that have been raised by the community and then you assess them against the planning scheme, which I note to all councillors, that's what we're here to assess under today. Whether we like them or not like them is not really the relevant issue, it's really whether they meet the planning scheme requirements. And things like parking, etc., when the development was built, met the parking requirements by having off-street car parking. The fact that they might be behind a gate, behind a roller door, unfortunately is probably not something that we can make a decision about. And whether people choose to access or not access those parking spots when they come to visit people who live in those townhouses is not really something that we can determine. That's something for the people who live in those residences and the people who come to visit on how they might arrange and use those facilities. And again, to talk about a gated community, and again, I'd take the comments made by Mr Benaki in regards to everybody's got a gate, everybody's got something that they sit behind and people still have to go in that gate to come and visit them, whether they live in a gated community or in just a house. I've got a house that you'd look at my house, it might look imposing because it's got a big gate in front of it. And I've got a roller door which comes down and closes my cars off. And it doesn't mean that I don't trust my neighbours. It doesn't mean that I don't like my neighbours. It's just that I want to have security for my family. So as a consequence of that, I find that as being quite reasonable and articulate. And I'll make the comment that people make communities, not gates. And I love the thought of what goes on in and around the street, the great community camaraderie that happens in Duke Street as stated by the Speaker. And to me, it's really up to the street as to how they interact. I came from a neighbourhood where I lived and my children ran next door when, for 30 years they used to be able to just traverse the street. I've moved into a new neighbourhood and my neighbour said to me, you're my neighbour, but that doesn't mean we have to talk to you. So the reality of it is, each neighbourhood acts in a different way. So my reputation's obviously been far exceeded me before I got there. But all I'm saying is that people make neighbourhoods, and I guess if the people of Duke Street want to interact with the people who live in the community of that new development, then I would hope that they would do so, and likewise the other way round, which would keep that neighbourly community. Having said that, we're looking at the planning scheme issues. The rubbish, which I think was an issue, I think has been answered on the basis that they're still going to have private contractors go in. The gating, they do have, the gates are set off the street, so anybody coming to visit can actually park in the driveway and punch in the buttons or wait for somebody to let them in. Whether they choose to park on the street, as the visitors of the other residents of Duke Street have the right to park on the street as they come to visit them, and I'm sure most of them don't have off-street car parking for their visitors to park either. So the reality of it is, as much of a change to Duke Street, and I think that's as much of I can understand it is a significant different application of housing in Duke Street as to what currently exists in there. The reality is it went through the planning scheme. The gates, in my view, have no real change to what we approved previously, and as such, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and I too would like to thank the residents of Duke Street for making their thoughts known to us all. My background has made me a retirement village manager of 3 sites, all of which had no gates, and one of the most commonly requested thing I had from the neighbours, or from the residents of the village, I should say, was why can't we have some form of gate so that we don't have all our things stolen from our backyards. And it was often very small things, garden ornaments, hoses, even garden tools they might leave out. And to me, this is not a gated community. This is simply a unit development with a gate. And it's a different way of looking at it. It is simply the same people, whether they had a gate or not, will live inside those units. And as Councillor Mackenzie said, it is in fact people that make communities and not gates. I also, like Michael, counted the number of gates that were closed when we went there today. Wasn't sure I got to 16, but I won't doubt that it was probably close to that. And as many have, and others have said, if you do go and visit someone who has a gate across your driveway in their house, you rarely would open that gate to go in to visit them. You'd park on the street. I have a number of friends who live in many of the other gated communities that are in Launceston, or perhaps communities with gates. And in each case, they have asked, or they've suggested to me that I can park inside, and given me either, I'll give them a call, they open the gate remotely, so that I'm not blocking up the street. And I'd imagine that what would happen in this environment as well. So to me, this is just perhaps an oversight at the start. I did do a quick head count of the newer developments that have been done around Launceston. 5 of them have gates on their community. There was only one new multi-development, multi-tenanted unit development of this price structure, shall we say, that doesn't have gates. Almost all of them have it. And it is simply so that those residents have the ability to make sure that their hoses aren't stolen when they are away, because they do offer the opportunity from a lifestyle point of view of being able to lock it and leave it, that it is in fact then behind a gate. And whilst the gate won't keep the keen thief out, as someone said, you can soon jump over the 4-foot high side fence if you want to go and rob one of the units that you might think's vacant. It will at least keep the honest thieves out. And so with that, I have no problem in supporting this particular motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I, like others before me, would like to thank those who took the time to contact us and speak today. I want to focus on a couple of things, and as I usually do with matters like this, I start with the representations. And the phrase gated community has been used a lot today, and by those who contacted us concerned about what's before us today. And it does state very, very clearly, Mr Mayor, in our documentation that's available on our website for public view, that the issue of gated communities is not necessarily something that's considered by our planning scheme. I want to touch on a couple of little things there that the previous 2 speakers didn't touch on. The perception of safety. Perception is a really, really important thing to people. And I agree with Mr Cowan's very passionate remarks that he talked about the fact that, fortified compounds aren't needed and all these sorts of things. And I agree with him, but for some people who view the world in different eyes, the councillors in this room and staff, I know at times receive emails talking about, the dangerous community, and I wouldn't walk through the streets of Launceston, but I'd walk through the streets of Sydney, and things like that, which again are perception, not necessarily fact. I'd also remark, Mr Mayor, that Mr Cowan highlighted, and I understand because he lives in a very, we all live in a great community, but he lives in a very community-minded area of the city and he highlighted the wonderful community spirit of that particular street. I'd suspect if Tas Police were throwing some statistics out, I wouldn't mind betting that when property crimes and so forth take place, the people that commit them aren't necessarily the people that live in the street. They're probably people that come from other parts of the city or surrounds, and sometimes from further afield. So I do understand the angst, Mr Mayor, that the West Launceston community, and particularly the Duke Street community, feel by a development that is very, very different to what they're used to. But as the previous speakers did say, people shut doors, they shut gates, they shut garages. They have to have that feeling of security, and for some people, that feeling of security comes in different ways. I'd also say, Mr Mayor, highlighting, as I said, this isn't part of the scheme. We can't knock something back because it's a gated community. Again, over time, things change. Councillor Harris in his remarks talked about some recent similar type developments. Perhaps the council of 20 years ago might not have been talking about these. So it is a change, and sometimes change brings unrest and uncertainty. One of the things I'd love from this, Mr Mayor, is that when people are living in these properties that we've heard about today, how terrific would it be for those people to join in and meet the wonderful other residents of Duke Street and enjoy the wonderful part of the city they live in. So, in concluding my remarks, whilst I've heard the concerns and understand the angst, the fact that it is an inverted commas gated community isn't a reason for us to knock this application back today. And I'm happy to support it. And as I said, I'm also happy to the new residents to Duke Street meeting the long-standing, community-minded and active citizens like Mr Cowan and others in that street. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So to be succinct and to be in line with the planning scheme, really the only thing that we have to talk about is the fact that the design does not provide a uniform transparency of not less than 30%, and therefore the proposal relies on the performance criteria. I certainly take on board all of the comments that have been raised. I certainly respect Mr Cowan and acknowledge the great community that is created in Duke Street. I also note that in years past there was considerable representation with regard to the townhouses and them being seemingly inappropriate to the street and the local housing density, and that many of those comments and feelings that the neighbours had at that time have continued to the representations that are made today. But in terms of the transparency, in terms of the one aspect requiring discretion and relying on the performance criteria, I would commend the motion as provided to the table.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will try and keep it brief, but I suppose the other thing, one thing to mention is, of course, that it is a retrospective application, and that it's never a good thing when the council has to discuss something that didn't gain approval at the correct time, and therefore has to put the community through that process. And having said that, it would no doubt have met approval if it had come along with the development in the initial phases. Just to speak briefly to the concept of a gated community, I suppose we've had them since medieval Europe, perhaps, walled cities and all sorts of things. It's nothing new. It's something, that other councillors have mentioned. Most people have a gate. I suppose the difference is it's quite a contiguous street, Duke Street, the houses. There's one or two newer buildings. This is probably the most recent iteration of that, and it does challenge us all when these things happen, that something new comes along. I would just like to reiterate what a previous speaker said, that let's hope that as a community that the new residents there and old residents there do reach out to each other and continue that good neighbourly relations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm fortunate enough to have a gate at my couple of properties. I've just built 4 houses a couple of years ago, and my sons always said, Dad, we want gates at the front, which we did. It's great for security. We all sleep well, and it's there for safety. So I'm all for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to close?
I think it's all been said, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 9.2, we do have a number of speakers for 9.2, Talbot Road, 29 Talbot Road. Dr. Rebecca Bradfield.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this. We had a meeting with Luke, who was a planning officer, and also with members, the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and another councillor previously, and the residents who were concerned asked me to speak on their behalf from Roman Court and Junction Street. This development involves dividing a parcel of land into 2 lots, with the smaller parcel having access onto Talbot Road, which is acknowledged by the developers to be the easy access, and it's an access onto a sub-arterial road. The balance lot, which is considerably larger and adjoins 2 lots owned by the developer, doesn't have any access onto any street if that Talbot Road access is taken away, but it does have frontage onto Junction Street. So the foreshadowed future application will no doubt require the large lot as well as the 2 other lots owned by the developer to have all of that development onto Junction Street, which is a narrow, no-through road. The concerns of the residents isn't that there's development on the site, but that this application will preclude a solution to possible traffic problems in the future, because Talbot Road is a more major road. It can tolerate a lot more traffic than Junction Street. That's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Bradfield.
Mayor and Councillor, thank you for your time. I live directly opposite the land discussed. I'm not anti-development or a NIMBY, quite the opposite. I'm a farmer and I develop farms. I'm not completely against the first subdivision. A sensible, well-considered development on that site would be good. I appreciate that you can only make a decision on the application in front of you. The problem is the successive developments that are planned for the area. I don't know what the long-term development plan is, and you probably don't know either. The developer and his team do. They are appearing not to be completely transparent with us. We know theoretically that 20 residences could be built on that site. The developer is the only one who knows how many he's intended to build. Their apparent secrecy and manipulation of the planning scheme and regulations will likely erode any potential goodwill that could be propagated. We know that services and utilities will be needed, and very likely at significant cost to the developer. To recoup these costs, it is likely that there will be motivation to build as many residences as possible. These may not be in one tranche. By spreading the development across a number of tranches, the traffic regulations could be manipulated. This will result in Junction Street becoming increasingly dangerous. This is the main issue, the safety of Junction Street, after the implementation of the developer's grand plan. A significant development will likely be well over the permitted incremental traffic increase allowed, if considered in totality. Let's not be sneaky or clever when safety is at risk. Will they be single dwellings or strata titles under the new plan? Will that be the total impact of the complete development on traffic safety on Junction Street? The developer has the opportunity now to do the right thing. Be transparent, allow for access to Talbot Road, foster some goodwill with the community, don't endanger kids on Junction Street, don't be greedy, be a sensible, sympathetic...
Thank you, your time is up. Thank you.
There is one more important, with your indulgence, Mayor.
You're over your 2 minutes already, sir.
There is a problem with the title and reference on the application is in fact incorrect.
Thank you.
So I forward evidence on that because you can't put it through without...
Thank you, your time is up. Lee Walters.
Mayor, councillors, thanks for your time. I rolled up on the fly, so really I've been a resident of Junction Street for 26 years, objected to the Roman Court development on the grounds of traffic flow. That's been evident for the last 6 years. A development that accesses Junction Street or potential to access Junction Street won't comply with the scheme. The traffic flow is not acceptable at this point. Parking's unattainable at times. I can back up Greg's evidence that it's dangerous. There would be, in my opinion, it would be a fortnightly occurrence where you're removing yourself from the driveway only to have to hit the brakes hard, or someone's roaring down Junction Street at more than 50 kilometres an hour. It's incredibly dangerous. The opportunity for multi-dwellings on large sites it'll be a dangerous outcome. So I would suggest that if we can access off Talbot Road, it would be a great outcome. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Yep, thank you. That's all the speakers that I have. Any other speakers? No? So 9.2, Talbot Road. Someone happy to move a motion? till we got a motion. Well, it's passed anyway. Oh, Councillor Mackenzie? We can't until we get a motion on the table. Moved, Councillor Mackenzie, seconded, Councillor Spencer. Question, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in follow-up from contribution from Mr Bradfield and the title volume number error in the report, I'm not sure, it's the first I've heard of it, but if there is an error, are we able to receive that, just for instance? Or can I ask the question, are we...
That is a question.
Sure.
Richard. You've got to go around there.
We're not aware of any issue. If there is an issue, we can have a look at that, but we're not aware of any. Well, we can, if there's an issue coming forward. If we're not aware that there is an issue.
Does it do any harm to receive a piece of paper? I don't know. If there is error.
Deputy Mayor. Sorry, you can't speak. So Richard, you can go and talk to him.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 34, in terms of the responses to the representations that have been raised, it says, and I quote, that there are no traffic capacity issues on Junction Street and that traffic from future development could be accommodated by that street. I wonder if, given that the bulk of representatives speak to that particular issue, if that could be unpacked a little further by those that are filling in today for the assessing officer.
Thank you. Is that Richard or is that...
I thought that might have been the case. Do you need some more time or...? So could I move the item lay on the table?
Lay on the table.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Soward, that the item lay on the table. All those in favour, raise your hand. That's all councillors present, so that is happening. It's on the table. 9.3. I think we have speaker for 9.3. Well, we've got 9.4, have we? Are they here? Somebody happy? Can I just better have a motion to put motion that we go to 9.4 and it's not speaker for 9.3 is not there, so moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Soward that we move to we bring forward 9.4. That is done. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present. So we now do 9.4, which is the Glenford Farm Road, Underwood. We have a speaker, Richard Pern.
Mr Mayor and councillors and public. Thank you for this opportunity to address council. The Launceston City Council has been let down by its planning scheme, the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme 2015. Town Planner Mr Ian Moore has been unable to consider the condition of Glenford Farm Road in reaching his recommendation that council approve the proposed subdivision. So what now? How can council fulfil its obligation of duty of care to the users of Glenford Farm Road? May I suggest that council raise a motion that its top civil engineers meet landowners on site to discuss history of the road and work out a solution to make this substandard public road safe for all to travel. Over the years, there have been something like 10 to 12 accidents on dangerous corners where drivers have no line of sight of oncoming vehicles. On one corner, at least 2 cars have gone through the fence, one landing in the paddock below. I had to bring my tractor down to rescue one and pull his car back onto the road. The general public have no idea of what they face on this substandard and potentially lethal public road. Council must act to resolve this situation and meet their duty of care to the drivers. The proposed subdivision has the potential to almost double the local traffic from 3 to 5 families on the road. Mr Mayor, I therefore respectfully request that this proposed subdivision be halted until the issues of Glenford Farm Road have been satisfactorily resolved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Warwick Morgan. Sorry, Warwick Morgan.
Councillors and Mayor, Launceston Council. My wife and I bought the property at 175 Glenford Farm Road in 2002 with 4 titles. This application for subdivision is not creating any new titles, but is actually moving the boundaries on the existing 4 titles. We're seeking to adjust the boundaries on the titles to better suit the landscape and farm management. Our aim with the adjustment of the boundaries is to keep the farming land together on 2 larger titles and keep the bush box at either end of the property on 2 smaller titles. Access to these titles will be 3 titles from Glenford Farm Road and 1 title from the Brown Mountain Road. Glenford Farm Road is 2.25 kilometres long and already services 3 dwellings. The 2 new accesses on Glenford Farm Road will be at a distance of Lot 4, 600 metres down the road, and Lot 3, 1,300 metres along the road. This will not significantly add to the traffic congestion on the road, and there will be fewer lots assessed now than on the original titles. Suggestions that this is a dangerous road are purely subjective, as we know many local and people from other places like Corula who come here to walk, push prams with babies, bring children on ponies because this is a quiet road. Each lot has elevated land that can be built on well above flood level. The photos submitted to in the representations were taken in the 2016 flood, the worst flood ever recorded, and on the floodplain where no building envelope was proposed. We seek council approval for our application as we have met all the council requirements for the reports. This application has a subdivision and is not creating any new titles but moving the boundaries on the existing 4 titles. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have for this item 9.4. Moved Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie? Yes.
I rise to to speak in favour of the motion. Again, as Mr Morgan stated, we aren't creating any new lots. We're actually just moving the goalposts on the land in question. We're actually not providing any new residences. We're not doing any DAs whatsoever on it. The gateways, if they are new, will only mean access off the road, but not any further development. So at this stage, all we're doing is changing the boundaries. If there is something to go on those blocks at some future date, then we will need to consider a DA at the council in relation to any further development there, which may increase the traffic, and therefore traffic will be something which will be considered in due course. As Mr Morgan also stated, there are 3 blocks which I think are accessible off that road and 1 which will be accessible off Brown Mountain Road. To me, again, there may be issues with the road as it stands today, and I'm quite comfortable and happy for the person who spoke against the development today to meet with our officer to discuss that further. But the reality of it is today we're just talking about the changing of the boundaries on a block on having 4 blocks of land beforehand and now having 4 different sized blocks of land.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is carried by all councillors present. We're now able to go back to 9.2. Sorry, oh, yes, sorry, no, we don't have to do it. Yeah, we do. I thought we... Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. Moved, Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Sauer, that we go back to item 9.2. Are we doing 9.3 or 9.2? No, we do a 9.2 because that was laid on the table, that's why. Because because that one's ready to go and the other one's not, I'm not sure. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. So we're just going to...
The Speaker's here, but whatever you want to do.
He is ready for 9.3. We'll do that after, though. No, we'll do a 9.2, but thanks for letting me know. So, Richard, can you explain the situation on 9.2?
It was pointed out that there was a typo in the applicant's report that was submitted with the development application. That typo in one of the folio numbers, that wasn't followed through in the council advertising or the council assessment, and we believe it's not material to the assessment.
Thank you. So we have a mover, Councillor Mackenzie, and a question, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I'm happy to repeat the question. On page 34 of the responses to a significant number of the representations, it says, and I quote, that there are no traffic capacity issues on Junction Street and that traffic from future developments could be accommodated by that street. I wonder if that could be unpacked a little further.
That's the advice that we received from the road authority. So if you want specific advice on the details of that, we would need someone from the road authority. But the referral and the advice provided to us is that's the case.
Thank you. Further follow-up question, Deputy, or not? No. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak?
I guess that I raised to speak in favour of the motion based on the advice of the road authority. I guess the difficulty we have here is that we've got 2 blocks of land which currently sit as one whole unit, which has access off Junction Street, I guess via sort of an access point onto the unmade section of Junction Street and onto Talbot Road. Clearly, by approving the subdivision today, we will cut off a block of land such that it will not be able to have access off High Street. And I'm guessing I'm knowing that's major concern to a number of the representatives here today. I understand that, but I also understand the fact that Junction Street does have the ability to run right the way through. I'm not sure what the street is at the other end. At some stage, a made road could be made to join Junction Street to another one at the other end, which would potentially reduce the impact on the traffic management out of Junction Street onto Wentworth Street. The reality of it is we actually don't know what the developer wishes to do with the proposed Lot 2. And that will be subject to a future application to council when any further development wishes to take place, at which time we will then need to take into consideration the traffic management issues associated with that development and its impact on Junction Street. I understand from the representatives, and I fully understand their concerns in that by us doing what we do today, one of the options, which was to take the traffic out through through Talbot Road, will be cut off from them on the basis of this subdivision today. So therefore we need to sort of understand that at some future stage we are now effectively resigning that Lot 2 to being accessible only from Junction Street. I'm comfortable with that to the extent that we actually don't have a development application and that the scheme does give us the ability to assess traffic management at that point in time. I take on board the comments made by the speakers that if they do it in a sectional thing, that may not become necessarily obvious as to how many lots may end up being in the subdivision, and that could create some angst. I would trust that our planners, in assessing that subdivision going forward, would need to have a view in relation to how the rest of that street would need to be subdivided in able to make that discussion, that decision in relation to the relative traffic management, because the planning scheme requires us to actually look forward as well as look at the exact application that we're looking at any time. I appreciate that Junction Street is somewhat, got some steep things, and Romain Court is one, and I know there are a number of issues currently existing there which shouldn't necessarily reflect on what we're deciding on today, other than it influences your thinking about the steepness of blocks and the accessibility of blocks through cars, where the steepness of things are making it difficult for people to traverse their own houses now on steep blocks. So I accept that there are some concerns in regards to that, but at the moment we actually don't have a development application in relation to Lot 2, and I think that that should more properly be dealt with in relation to a future development. I'm comfortable that Lot 1 off Talbot Road is quite comfortably dealt with in regards to its accessibility to the main street. And I do understand, in making the comments that I do, that we are cutting off the ability of Lot 2 to access that same street. Having said that, our road authority has given us their view that the road can cater for any additional development created by Lot 2, and as such, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer? No, sweet. Any other? Councillor Walker, question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to our planning officers, is there any way, I'm not sure who the owners of the adjacent lots are, whether that's related to the owners of the proposed subdivision lot, but is there any way that that would have potential impact? Neither of those two lots have access to Talbot Road.
Correct.
But is there any way that, you know, potential driveways could impact on those other two lots, or, you know, potential access off Junction Street could preclude access to either of the other lots, or impact, whether it be stormwater access, whether it be sewage access, or anything else like that?
Thank you. Richard?
You want to understand whether this would preclude the reasonable development of the adjoining lots? Just let me be clear on the question. Yeah. I mean, there's potentially a number of configurations how that lot might develop. I mean, one of the key things here, I suppose, is that the Talbot Road frontage proposed is only 13 metres, which is not necessarily enough to get a public road in. So the land is very large for a unit development, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest that the entire parcel would be appropriate for a unit development in the first instance. So given a public road access would have to access Junction because the Talbot Road frontage isn't wide enough to have a public road, it doesn't really preclude too many development options. Perhaps it might preclude an entire three-title unit development with no access to Junction Street, but that wouldn't be a particularly desirable type of development. So, you know, there are other options of one in, one out, but we're getting into hypotheticals. I think the potential for these units these blocks to develop either in freehold titles or multi-unit developments off Junction Street is appropriate.
Thank you. Question, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. A subsequent question with regard to that response. So for me, knowing the situation with Junction Street and the fact that it's I guess cut off, what then would be the responsibility of the developer into the future with regard to expanding or linking up Junction Street?
Richard?
The normal process would be if a subdivision of these blocks is proposed, so if it was decided to either construct a cul-de-sac, if that was appropriate, or to bring lots parallel with Junction Street, then the frontage of those new lots would need to be constructed to the extent necessary at that time. Now, there are a number of development options which don't require that, but it's Council's policy to require unmade road reserves to be constructed to the extent of the new development. Because there's no development proposed at this time, it probably is appropriate to leave that until we know that.
Deputy? No? No. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to go. Councillor Harris.
Yes, thank you. I'll stand to support this development application. To me, looking at this development, the subdivision of the Talbot Road block is sensible. to use it as an access from a house that might be built further down the road towards the Junction Street end of the block in its current configuration would give you a slope of something approaching 22 degrees to get up onto the road, just as a driveway. And to me, that is certainly not sensible. It would seem that we don't know what the future holds for this particular balance of land after we cut the top off it, the Talbot Road bit, and we then have a balance of land that doesn't have an immediate access onto Junction Street. However, where we went today at Duke Street, we saw in what was done many years ago, where a small slip service road, call it what you like, a driveway, was created to enable access to Duke Street from a little side road while Hillside Crescent continues on. And I would see something along those lines, or would hope, would be part of any future development. And in fact, as the development along Junction Street continues, it will in fact run into the other part of Junction Street that sits at the top of Atlas Street, which then hooks down onto McKellar Road, an area I'm sure you're very familiar with, Mr Mayor. So it is, to me, a logical extension. We wait with interest to see what the development application from the landowner is for the future, because that will be when we will decide whether in fact what he's proposing is in fact sensible for the rest of that land. It does have magnificent views. It does have challenges in building any sort of house on it because of the slope, and I guess from that the potential for it to be landslip and others, but that is not for our decision today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
I was hoping there would be a couple more speakers actually, but I'm still gathering my thoughts on this, and it is problematic from quite a few levels. For people growing up in Launceston, we see these blocks of land. We almost presume that they've been set aside because of water spring issues, of landslip issues and things like that, and then lo and behold, along comes a proposal to develop them. And it's true that building techniques have improved, and there are different technical approaches to challenging blocks like this. But the difficulty with making these decisions for council is, of course, we don't know what that development will look like. The local neighbourhood doesn't know what that development will look like. And so changing the layout of these lots, it puts a different pressure that didn't exist previously. And that's what I have difficulty with. It's something that at present people can accept that this entire lot does have access from Talbot Road. What the future holds, what solutions can be found, it's as if with that not being apparent in this decision, makes it very difficult. I can well understand the planning scheme is asking us to just judge this on its merits, regardless of what happens in the future. But that does put not just the council in a difficult position, but also the local neighbours who, it's completely understandable their concerns about what the future holds. Not so much for the Talbot Road subdivision, but for the balance lot. And being a balance lot implies, if I'm not mistaken, that it will have future plans put upon it that are not simply to keep it as a single lot, but that it may be strata titled, that it may be subdivided again. So it'll bring future challenges with it, but unfortunately I don't see how I can vote against the approval of this DA. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the speakers and also the councillors before me. I too struggle, I suppose, with the potential future of the development, but this lot has always had the potential to be developed, and it still will have the potential to be developed, because at the moment we're not there yet assessing the development application. And I think that's the time where we can be strategic in our decisions in regards around the traffic and the future use with the traffic flow. That's, I suppose, at the end of the day, why we'll be standing to support the motion as it sits. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy?
Just briefly, I mean, it is hard to vote, for me to vote in support of this, but there's no planning consideration or reason really why I can't. I guess it's that dual role where, in terms of a master planning scenario, you're kind of making an isolated, foolish decision versus the planning authority decision that is before us, which makes perfect sense. And it's disappointing, I guess, that there's not opportunity for one to talk to the other. Certainly understand, you know, what some of the other speakers have touched on. Also understand the challenges of that street, and standing there the other day and seeing the gradient, seeing the challenges, seeing the problems that are exposed, it's clear that there are issues. I mean, the footpath is barely wide enough for a person of my width to stand on, let alone someone, you know, pushing a pram or something similar. There are significant challenges up there, and I think that into the future it's going to be something that's going to require a lot of work, and we're going to reflect on decisions made in the past that have seen us arrive at that particular point. So certainly we'll be supporting the motion that's before us today, and look forward to any future applications being assessed as they always are, with due diligence, taking into consideration the challenges of that space, which to my mind is in direct competition to the comment made on page 34 with regard to the road being able to take further cars and traffic.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay? No. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close?
Thanks, Mayor. I will. Thank you for all the comments that have been made, and again, a bit like Deputy Mayor, it'd be great if we had a total plan of what was going to happen with Lot 1 and Lot 2. It would make it a lot easier, and I think listening to some of the speakers today, if they knew what the total plan was like, maybe they could have got some comfort in what this was going to look like. The reality is we don't have that, and we can sit here and hypothesise about what it might or might not look like into the future, but the reality is we have no idea until the developer puts an application in front of us. All we can do today is to take on advice from our planners, the issues that have been raised and the way that they've responded to the questions of those that have represented against the development, and I guess ultimately take trust that the planning scheme will be strong enough and robust enough to deal with those issues in regards to egress and access, and taking on Councillor Gibson's comments in regards to the footpaths and things like that, there may well be even an opportunity for us to actually make Junction Street a better street as a outcome of this development, because I think that as we do the development and we get the unmade road made into bits and more made road, there's an opportunity for us to consider whether there are better ways in which we can manage that street for everybody in that street, not just the benefits of that subdivision. So I think holistically, I guess we've been, I won't say put on, we haven't been warned, we've been put on notice about a number of the issues that are there by the residents that live there now, and the concerns they've got with the properties around them and the issues they currently have. And again, nothing changes as a result of what we do today in that street whatsoever. It's only what will happen into the future that will change the way that that street is used. So I guess what I would like to do is take the good comments that have been made by the residents to say, let's put that in our bag of tricks to make sure that when we start looking at the subdivision and the future use of Lot 2, that we understand those issues and take them seriously into consideration in making sure that that development application is the best development application we can make on that land.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Now go to 9.3. We do have a speaker for 9.3, Steve Ison.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Steve Ison. I'm here on behalf of my wife and I. We own 25 Marine Street, which backs onto the development of 30 Lanoma Street. We've owned the home for about 13 odd years, lived in Tassie for about 14 odd years. Since that time, I should point out we no longer live there, we still own the home. Since that time there's been development on the downhill side, on the uphill side. We've learned a little bit about development next to one's property and what opportunities you have when you might not fully agree with what's going on, which is the reason why this third development adjacent to our property, we thought we needed to make reference to a few issues. But I'll specifically just probably make reference to one point, and that is what we're concerned about, and goes to the heart of the matter, is the visual impacts caused by the apparent scale, bulk or proportions of the dwelling when viewed from the adjoining lot. Ours is the adjoining lot. I was told that councillors would see or be given copies of before and after photos. I don't know whether you have or not. I've had some photos here if I'm allowed to present those at all. I don't know. But before and after photos. Yep.
They have been circulated, so I assume can't speak for every councillor, but some have got the thumbs up. So
okay, very good. So, and I apologise for the quality of the images. The before photos were taken some time ago, and we didn't realise they'd be being presented at council meeting. Our concern is the loss of visual amenity from the development. And as I said, we learnt this from the developments on both sides of our property, uphill and downhill. A whole row of trees have been removed. We've done so prior to the permit application actually being approved. And we now have a development there, which is, I'm sure, is going to be a beautiful home. My wife and I are not against development, but we think we with a little bit of forethought, maybe the property could have been just shortened a wee bit from its extensions. The trees could have stayed there. They would have had a lovely home, and we would have maintained our privacy and our visual amenity.
Thank you. Your time is up. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've got 9.3. Someone happy to move a motion? Councillor Harris moved. Seconded by Councillor Finlay. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
I will. We visited the site today, and I thank Steve for his comments as a near neighbour, and also the photos, which did show that once there was a lovely barrier along the back fence between him and the neighbour of trees that have now been removed. Trees cause a lot of neighbourhood disputes. Often people have them too big and they want them cut down. In this case, Steve would have preferred the trees to remain. It is in fact the landowner's distinction what they choose to do with the trees, of course. I would agree that it would be good had they stayed to improve the amenity of the lot from that angle, but I suspect that under the major earthworks that's going on, it was neither practical to do so. Hopefully the new development will then plant out some new trees to help improve that, but it will take some time to grow. I did note that the trees on the side boundary of the property were remaining, which actually provided some privacy and shade for the swimming pool to the bottom side of this particular development. But visiting there today, the development has had 2 development applications put forward. The first one was a much longer build and went right towards the back fence. This one has been shortened up and has been now 4 metres off the back fence, and there's only a few small considerations for us, or discretions for us, to actually consider under the planning scheme. So that does indicate that the property developer is listening to what our planning people and in fact his neighbours are saying, and I can only hope that as the property gets developed, approval is gained perhaps today for him to develop the property as it is. He then proceeds to plant some trees as soon as he has the walls up so they can get growing, so that perhaps the amenity of the neighbourhood will be restored. But any particularly steep piece of land like this, the natural tendency is going to be for people to want to terrace it, and unfortunately that makes it difficult, because then you have retaining walls and things like that as a necessity to make that happen. But obviously the location of everything, and in real estate that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
I do note that this the initial development application was eventually withdrawn, and this is the second iteration of this development, and that what was going to be a building that was within 1 metre of the back fence is now going to be about 4 metres away from the back fence, and so there's something good there insofar as there has been a response to objections that were made, not just from directly behind this lot, but from adjacent lots. There's still concern from representatives about loss of amenity in terms of sunlight. There's concern that work, was done prior to development applications being approved, and I am assured that that wasn't the case. That the work that was taken place, that did take place, was not part of the development application. So reluctant. It's another situation that the council find when people building in their backyards and building double stories. In this case, it's not a duplex. It's not a separate property. It's an extension of a house, but nonetheless, it certainly pushes the bounds of the development of the planning scheme in terms of the coverage of land, in terms of the building envelope, and in terms of the proximity to neighbouring properties. On that last point, that has been improved somewhat. It still is outside the building envelope, although not nearly as much as it was. And it still will have definite impacts on those neighbours. So reluctantly I will be supporting this, but again, I will reiterate that I think the council, as a council, we're going to face this more and more often. Quite often it's when it's a separate subdivision or strata lot, but when we're getting double-storey buildings in the rear of yards, we are going to face more and more objections from people who are losing their privacy, they're losing their sunlight, and it may be foliage. There's a number of issues there, and I would like to think that the council can, over time, develop further policy in this area that provides guides for people who wish to develop. I know it's the only game in town. If you want to make some money, you buy a block of land that has the access, that has the space in which to do a development. But in this case and in many others, it's really pushing the bounds of neighbours' amenity that concerns me the most. And I do appreciate the fact that in this case, at least the developer has gone back and made some improvements. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Dakin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, I stand to support the motion. I think the developers did a great job in amending the design and the plans initially. We'll just make a comment and say that privacy works both ways. If your neighbour chops down trees, you have the opportunity to plant trees in your own yard. It's not tongue-in-cheek, but that's one thing that you can control. And look, I hear that concede Councillor Walker's comments in regards to infill development and seeing a lot more of this. I think that's a good thing for the city and a way that we're going to be moving forward. So, again, I support the development.
Yep, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close?
No, well, I will briefly just to say that looking at the plans, there are in fact 2 large trees to be put on the boundary with Dr Ison's property to replace those removed during the thing. It will be a bit of a barrenness across where the car driveway will be, and so perhaps he would take up Councillor Dakin's suggestion of planting trees on his side of the fence to block that out as well. But other than that, I commend this motion to the table.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We then move to Mayor's announcements. And I've just got one I do want to mention because I was privileged on Saturday night to go to the Northern Tasmania Junior Soccer Association annual dinner, and they did report on a very good season. Great result. They were thankful they could do most of the season, but they want to pass on their thanks to the councillors and to our staff in particular for the relief package where they didn't have to pay the rent for that period of time. They really stressed how important that was for them. So well done to our staff and to the councillors on that decision that we made back then. They are very thankful, and they were so thankful, in fact, they were decided to return a little bit of the money to the individual clubs as well. And I think that was a really good gesture on their part. So the clubs got a little bit back from the fees that they had paid. So it was a win-win, and it was a fantastic night, and well done to be able to do that and to see the benefit of the package that we put together is working and has benefited many clubs. And here's one that wanted us to know that and to be extremely, extremely thankful that they could have a fantastic and successful season. So well done to Council. Councillor reports. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. Just two. One just from Theatre North to thank the Council for their indulgence in regards to assistance during the COVID times, which was at a meeting just before I went away. So just coming back and saying thanks in regard to that. And the second is in relation to sort of another hat that I wear, but a person who's been extremely vital to our community in the northern suburbs, is just to note Denise Delphin making the decision to retire from the Northern Suburbs Community Centre at Christmas time. She's much loved and will be much missed, particularly as I've just taken on the President's role in the last 3 months, so I said thanks very much. But the reality of it is Denise has been a stoic supporter of that community for 37 years, both in the terms of a volunteer, a coordinator, and in the last 21 years as the General Manager. So I just think it's worthwhile highlighting her role in what we do out in the northern suburbs and how well she's interacted with council staff over many years in regards to the many projects that we've done together, and she certainly led the way in so many developments up in that community. So I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly.
Yep, thank you for that. And just a reminder that we are now no longer sitting as a planning authority.
I can do that as a planning authority.
No, we're not, so that's good. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. I just wanted to reference that I had the pleasure Friday week ago of attending the launch of the state's cultural and creative industry strategy. And the reason that I reference that is it was the opportunity, of course, to speak with the Arts Minister and to speak with the Secretary of the Department with regard to the great things that we are hopefully going to pass later on this afternoon in terms of our own cultural strategy, but to see the amazing synergies between those documents and to see the way that the work that we've been undertaking over the last 4 years clearly is referenced and talks to this statewide strategy. So looking forward to continuing to work together with the state government, continuing to have the Arts Minister up north enjoying the wonderful cultural pursuits that our city provides and offers. We know that she's an outstanding advocate for the arts and an outstanding supporter of the QV Mag and the Princess Theatre, and we look forward, now that the COVID chains are breaking down, to seeing her continue to support the activities here in the north. And a lovely synergy there with Mr Mayor mentioning, and it's listed in your own report, the fact that there was a very small reception to mark the Princess Theatre's 50th anniversary of celebrating live performance at the venue. There'll be a much larger, more community-focused celebration when occupancy levels are able to increase, but it was particularly fitting, I think, on that occasion to recognise one staff member's work in Stephen Grieve, who had worked at the Princess Theatre in a live theatre capacity since day dot, celebrating over 50 years of service, having worked at some of our other live theatre venues before that. And it was just great to be able to be there on that occasion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
Thanks, Mayor. Just really quickly, I just want to acknowledge CityProm, the great work that they've currently been doing. They've just rolled out the Love Lonnie campaign that a lot of you have seen around the town. Amanda and the team have done a great job in supporting local businesses coming into the festive season. I know they've got a lot of events that have come on, and if you haven't had a chance yet to jump up the top of St John Street, you'll probably see the green wall that's just come up on Orchids. Again, CityProm, obviously with the City Council, have been instrumental in getting that up, and it's great to see. So keep up the good work, CityProm.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I attended the Waste Not Awards for the first time this year, and I was absolutely blown away by the winners and the things that they had done. And I do think each of us could take the opportunity to have a look at the winners of the Waste Not Awards and in the various categories and see how many of those we could apply to our own businesses or in fact to our own lives. So I just thought it was a great thing, and while I'm on my feet I might as well mention that the Councillor Walker did a wonderful job hosting the Heritage Snap Awards as well, where I know you participated in handing out the awards.
Thank you. No other further reports from councillors? Questions on notice from councillors is there. Then questions without notice. Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I just note, and given there has been some media around it and lots of people have certainly asked us with regard to it, I appreciate the response on 12.1.1. It says council can send a written invitation. I wasn't sure if that meant that council would or council could do that, just to be clear, because lots of people have spoken to me about.
Yeah, a few have spoken to me as well, and I think if it's going to happen, it'll have to be a motion. It would be approved by council.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? 13.1, Tender Review Committee. Moved Councillor Cox, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Cox?
Pretty straightforward, Mayor, just Hudson Street West upgrade car park facilities.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 13.2, Cataract Gorge. Councillor Walker moved. Councillor Harris second. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Walker?
Just briefly, Mayor, that the committee met with new council membership. As I mentioned in our previous public meeting, we have been rejoined by Don Deffendorfer, who's a community member, along with Anna Povey and John Ralph as new committee members. Of note being that our next and probably final meeting for the year we shall be holding at the Gorge itself. We thought it appropriate that if we're going to be talking about such matters, we may as well actually be there first hand to discuss them, there's certainly a lot of energy about the group in terms of a lot of things wanting to be discussed in terms of future improvements for the region, including inviting West Tamar Council to potentially send a representative if they wish to join that committee. We already have a member, a representative from the Meander Valley Council who regularly attends. It's such an interesting area. It's the corner of 3 different councils, that can be the precursor for a larger discussion, I suppose, of that region in terms of input, potentially in cooperation with other councils, as well as National Parks and Wildlife. So, good things to look forward to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we move on to 13.3, Pedestrian and Bike Committee. Moved Councillor Harris, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Only to say that we did meet in October, and the start of the park and ride projects, that the new park and ride signs have been put into the car parks near Hobras Bridge and also in Conway Street at Heritage Forest. So there are some new park and ride to encourage people who may come further from town, that they don't want to ride all the way on their bike, but they can then bike from there into the rest of the city or wherever they're going to for work. So this complements the original park and ride that we put in down at the Tower Race Centre at Trevallum. So that is something moving forward, and we look forward to establishing more park and ride locations around the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 14.1, Council Workshop Report. Move Deputy Mayor. Amendment. Deputy, yes?
Just to remove the reference there to flying the flags policy review.
Oh, okay, correct. With that amendment, so it's moved Deputy, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy? Yes. Councillor Harris? Any councillor wish to speak to? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 15.1, Deputy Mayor.
Got a speaker.
Oh, I've got a speaker. Sorry, thank you. We do it too. Mr. Ted Sands.
Thanks, Mayor and councillors. Before you start the clock, Mayor, I'd like to ask a question of the General Manager.
You've got a speaking of 2 minutes and that's all you have. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll speak.
Your time has started.
I refer to the legal letter received by council, and I'm a bit confused as to why. In the second paragraph it says, we are now asked as to whether the council has the right to construct a drain on property that adjoins 403 Glenwood Road. We understand that the purpose of the drain would be to alleviate the drainage problem complained of by the owner of 403. Our instructions are that the drain on the neighbouring property is not required to effectively drain Glenwood Road. Well, if you then scan down, Mayor, to the last paragraph, and it's always been the bone of contention here when I last appeared here that it was the view of the majority of councillors that it would be a precedent would be set if this was allowed to happen. And clearly, the legal partners have said, no, it would not create a precedent. So I think that decision or the thought of the majority of councillors sitting around this table is null and void. It's not a legal decision, Mayor, it's simply one of a moral or political dilemma this council finds itself in, whether to go ahead and do this work or deny the right of a property owner and a long-term ratepayer to have some rectification of a drain that council installed some 20 years ago. I know there's a thought that we have no documentation. Well, might I say, when this was done 20 odd years ago, it was probably done on a handshake. And I know the person who did the work was with this council for 50 years, started here as a boy. And I just asked the council to sit around this table, please reflect, would you be happy with having a drain on your property that didn't function, installed by the council, and would you be happy to sit back and say, well, nothing's going to happen? And
thank you.
I hope that you reflect on that and
thank you. Your
make a
time is
decision
up.
according. Thank you.
So, Deputy Mayor, move the motion.
Move the motion as listed on 92, page 92, thank you.
Page 90. Oh, sorry, you're doing that. Okay, page 92. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Soward. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak to it?
Just briefly, and I'd like to first of all start by thanking the staff, the officers, for the provision of the response that is provided, and also for the legal advice that accompanied this particular document. And I do also reference the second page with regard to precedent, because I know for some members around the table that was a significant issue, and I certainly appreciated that at the time. The legal opinion from Tremaine is such that that's not the issue. For me, briefly, it's all listed in the notice of motion that's provided. The landowner at 403 has raised concerns with council regarding the drainage across the property. The landowner gave permission to access his land 20 odd years ago, and that was to alleviate flooding on Glenwood Road, but we've not been back since. And I believe, unfortunately, despite the fact that there's no documentation in the file, that still leaves us with a moral, ethical dilemma as to whether or not we fix the problem that was created or not. As I say there, in my view, I believe council has an ethical obligation to remedy this work, and it needs to be consistent with the values that we espouse. And I believe the decision that was made at a previous meeting that I'm requesting to be rescinded today does not fit with those. Many, as I say, around the table were nervous, were concerned with regard to precedent, and I reference the letter that clearly says that the answer is no. There would be no precedent set. Each use of a council power, such as that provided in section 34, is dependent upon the council determining that such drainage work is necessary, and each application for assistance would need to be considered on the basis of its own facts.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I thank the Deputy for bringing this forward. Just, and I concur with everything that he said, just something I guess that I wanted to flesh out in a little bit more detail. The issue of precedent is spelled out by Mr Tremaine in his letter. Key phrase there for me talks about each application for assistance with drainage work would need to be considered on the basis of its own facts. Well, obviously, Mr Mayor, in a council area the size of ours, there would be, if there were other matters like this, there would be different facts and different circumstances, different time periods that surround those. And as councillors are aware, new councillors, councillors that have been here a fair while, there are different things that happen at different times where people, individuals, ratepayers, contribute to something, I'm using the term broadly, something bad happening, and then come to the council and say, help, fix it, please help me. In this particular instance, as has been quite clearly spelled out, this work was carried out 20-something years ago by council on this gentleman's property, and as a result of that work, other things have happened that's created concern for him, and which is obviously why we're here today. 20 years ago, or 20-something years ago, is obviously a fair while. Things happen, things get filed in a place where they don't get filed and shouldn't get filed or whatever. It'd be nice if we did have documentation to back this up. But nonetheless, I think that the concern that has been raised about precedent should be somewhat eased by the last paragraph in this particular letter. So happy to support this, Mr Mayor, and it does spell out very, very clearly in the Deputy's motion that he's highlighted the steps that need to be taken to make good this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, if I could just ask two questions on the instruction officer. Manager, just in relation to Glenwood Road itself, in his professional opinion, with the building of Glenwood Road, did that create the flooded area, or is this a low-lying area that would have flooded regardless of whether Glenwood Road was there? And my second question is in relation to if we were to take action to, I guess, remove the water from that land, what would be required to be done?
So firstly, the water that runs over the property is natural runoff that follows the topography of the land. So whether the road is constructed there or not, the water would still end up in the same place. And whether we modified the drain or not, the same area of land would have been inundated because the water follows gravity along the topography of the land. Sorry, the
second question was about how would we get the water off the land?
How would we get the water off the land? We would have to construct a drain with sufficient gradient, 1%, across this property and then the two following neighbouring properties. So that would get to around about a depth of 2 metres. And given the land is used for cropping and stock, sufficient batters on that would actually see the drain being graded back from that 2 metres depth, taking up around about a 20 metre width.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Spencer?
My only concern, thanks Mayor, my only concern is the neighbours, would they be happy to have 2 metre cuts in their land?
That's a question. Yep. Thank you.
We haven't been able to get in contact with the neighbours to discuss that, but I think the Deputy Mayor's proposed motion addresses that issue.
Okay.
Question, Councillor Dakin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think just a question to the CEO. Being that this is the first rescinded motion I've been involved in, is it a requirement that we have 100% approval around the table, or just a majority? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you. 7.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And again, there are two aspects in which I spoke for the motion, the previous motion, the last one. One was precedent, and I note that that has been dealt with in the advice that we received from Mr Tremaine. It does talk about the moral dilemma that we then have with others that might then seek our assistance, regardless of whether that's a precedent or not. It may then create an expectation that we might do certain things, so that is an issue that we still need to deal with. And I guess moreover, my issue is the fact that this land is low-lying land and it is where the water would naturally go. and therefore it would sit. So therefore, for us to do anything meaningful for this block of land, we would then need to construct a dam or a waterway which would have sufficient gradient to enable it to eventually make its way to the river. As General Manager Eberhard stated, to do that we would need to go through 2 neighbouring properties as well, which would be, by the depth to get the gradient that we require to do it, would significant earthworks, and I think in the estimate, I think it was over $120,000, I think was noted. It's not just a matter of just cleaning out the existing drain, because that won't do anything to where the water will lie when it runs off the road in a flood or whatever. It will still stay there, but it'll just lie over the top of the drain, is the way I understand it from the technical advice given by Mr Eberhard. So as a consequence of that, I see the land is the land, and it's always been the land, and the land was always going to receive the water when it runs off, wherever it was running off, whether the road was there or not. So as a consequence of us taking that on board, firstly we have to then commit to 120,000. I think it said we have 390,000, I think, as an overall budget for the whole of our drainage systems within our municipality. So that is nearly 1/3 of our drainage requirements to fund this one development on a property which actually was always going to be flood prone because of its particular topography. So as a consequence of that, I'll stick with my original decision to support the original motion, and therefore won't be supporting the notice to rescind.
Thank you. Councillor Harris has a question.
Yes, if I can. A question for General Manager first. General Manager Eberhard, I should say. Just in relation to the 2 other properties, does that then, that may be cut by this drain that we're proposing, does that then get the water flowing into what would be the North Esk River there, or is it in fact going to then just be flooding onto someone else's property? Because it's my understanding you cannot direct stormwater from one property to another as part of what you're doing.
It'll make sure the water moves away to sufficient sort of a drain where there's sufficient grade to get it into the North Esk. It won't go directly to the North Esk. But in terms of as long as the drainage extends across all 3 properties, we won't be creating an inundation issue on another property, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I guess my question, would you increase the volume of water because you're now more efficiently moving it from the first property, the second and third? Because once you cross the second and subsequent properties, they've now got a nice stormwater drain to drain any other problems they may have into that particular drain. And so I was just wondering at what point we're going to get to the actual source of the water, where we then are having the water running into this proper stormwater collection point. Because this is rural stormwater, not urban stormwater, and it's a very different fact.
So all I can say really is that the peak flows would increase because you're getting the water there quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay, wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do on 2 points. One is the matter of determining to rescind a motion, particularly when the motion was so recent. In my mind, any consideration of the past of rescinding a motion would require something to have substantially changed in between the event that we'd made a decision and when we're being asked to rescind it. For me personally, I asked a number of technical questions of the expert who was here at the decision, Catherine Pugh, who was here at the time, and I satisfied myself that the recommendation that we had at the time was appropriate, and as nothing has changed technically, I'm unable to support the motion to rescind.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I also stand to speak against the motion. When I heard that this motion was going to be on the agenda, I took a short drive out to view the property myself. Having lived for 28 years with exactly this problem of a highway that drained to my property boundary, which caused me to have a swampy 10 to 15 metre backyard at the end of my block whenever it was rained, and in summer it was lovely and dry. And I could see the similarities. I could see, as Mr Eberhard has said, about it is in fact the natural drainage point, that this is the low point of the land for that whole particular part of the area. I found within 5 minutes drive, 18 Relbia Road, 87 Relbia Road, 184 Relbia Road, 256 Relbia Road, 370 Relbia Road, 2 more in Redwood Crescent, all of which you could look and say this is exactly the same And what, despite the legal opinion, what are the expectation and precedents we are setting for ourselves should we agree to do this? And I do think it is time that if the drain doesn't function properly on your property, which is really what's there, because there is an existing drain, runs from the fence line to a dam. The property owner has a pump that clearly he pumps water out of the dam. It has an overflow which runs down the side of his property. It's well overgrown. It's never been cleaned out. But as a property owner, perhaps that's his role, not ours. Our role stops in a rural environment at the edge of the fence. So happy for us to clean that little bit out from the where the culvert comes across the road to force it down his drain, but he must deal with the consequences of it, because if the road wasn't there, he would still have the same water whenever it flooded, whenever it rained, regardless of what was there. So in this particular case, the other point that I want to perhaps ask is, the motion asked the CEO to go and do something that I think he would have difficulty to do. And that is, the CEO has been asked to then get the drain built, extended over 2 properties, to 2 property owners who won't talk to us. Now, we can't go onto someone's property and just build a drain across their property without their permission. So I think even if this motion were to succeed, then I think nothing would change, because if those property owners won't give us permission to do it, it is not going to make any difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker?
Yeah, just a question, thank you. Yeah. I'm just getting value for money out of General Manager for Infrastructure today. Is there, I have not been to the site, I've looked at maps and things like that, but is there anything in terms of landfill that the council could do to alleviate our part of what is seen by some as a problem, i.e. a low-lying land, a low-lying road that would seem to slightly concentrate the water to one point? Is there anything else that council could do in terms of roadworks, remediation, filling the verge, that would minimise the pooling of water, shall I say, or the concentration of water?
Thank you.
In this case, the only way to fix the inundation issue is to build a bigger drain.
Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to stand and support the Deputy's motion today, and I especially like aligning our council's values with that rescinded motion. But after listening to my fellow speakers, I put my farmer's hat on, having a farming background for, well, probably close to nearly 80 years, as far as, I mean, not personally, but my family. Some land's just not usable, and in a rural setting, farmers obviously are well aware of that, and you've got swamps and you've got water that sits there and it won't drain, and some's dry and some's rocky, and this portion of land, as General Manager Everhart said, the water would be there regardless of if the drain was there, and it's not going to have the most highest and best use as, you know, probably the land that's 50 metres in the next paddock. And I think I look at that from purely a rural setting, and hence why I unfortunately won't be supporting the Deputy with his motion. I'll be against it today.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, you wish to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, first of all, I want to thank all for their respectful contributions to the debate. Obviously, when we considered this matter last time, we didn't have a full complement of councillors present. We don't today either, but I still wanted the opportunity to respectfully have this item considered again. I knew it would be hard work to get over the line. I also knew there are other things that are at my disposal in terms of the media and other ways that I could have approached it. I approached it through this mechanism, and I want to thank you for the respectful way that you've considered it, and the way that the officers went about assisting and providing their expert advice. I go home happy that I've done my bit for someone who was dissatisfied and unhappy with the council. I go home happy that my alignment with our values and my alignment with our strategic priority for me personally, such as it does for you, sits well with what I've done today, and I thank you for the way that you've let me engage with that.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. That's 3. Those against? So the motion is lost. You've got the numbers? 3, 4, and yeah, the rest against. Thank you. Now move on to 15.2. And I'll move the motion if I'm allowed.
Thank you. So 15.2, there are no speakers. Mayor, would you like to move?
Very happy to move the motion. Is there,
Someone to second the motion? Oh, Mayor. No, Councillor Stolzencheck. Thank you. Mayor, would you like to speak?
I might have to. No, very happy to speak to this motion. As you would be aware, or a lot of you would be aware, that I've been involved in the White Ribbon Committee for many, many years. Some of you have been on that committee over the journey as well. And first of all, I want to say that in no way does this bear on our council, what we are doing at the moment, because I believe we are setting the scene and doing some amazing work, CEO, and to our staff already in what they are doing, the work that has been happening. And there's obviously plenty of examples in the report, and anyone that's not sure, they can read the council employee protections. We also have community grants as a council. We have support of community awareness campaigns, and we have done in many times supported White Ribbon in their campaigns, and many of the vehicles also have been identified as supporting that as well, which I thank the CEO and the staff for doing that. Domestic and family violence is a very serious issue, and we all, I'm sure, are aware of that, and it's something that affects many in our local community, and that can include staff and others outside as well. The stats are all there. I won't go through all those, but it's quite many, almost a third of homicides are related to this effect. And even in our city in the last few years, there have been some which has been affected, and a family that I know quite closely that it's had that impact on them. Our people is one of our mottos, is that we care about our community and we go home and we want to feel safe and well, and this is one of those ways that we can do that. So what we're asking for is a strategy to make sure that we not only have in place what we are doing, but we can do anything else that we can do, but also to see if there's any other way that we can be a leader in the community to continue to help and to bring this matter into the limelight. Pleased to see that the officer, General Manager Hurst, has made the statement there that this is consistent with the purpose and the role of the Livable Communities team. Engagement with relevant service providers and other jurisdictions can be undertaken with existing officer resources. So it's not going to be a burden on us as a council, but it's going to certainly be something that should, when it proceeds and we get some actions in place, it's going to have a benefit to the wider community, which is going to be very important. Also, to see that it's amazing the number of people that are out there already trying to work in this field, and I recognise that, and I want to thank those. And what this motion will do is working with them and working together so that we can come up with a motion that is accepted widely in the community, and we are then going to continue to raise awareness and educating. So I really recommend this motion to the table and go from there. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Seconder, Councillor Stolzencheck.
Thank you. Domestic and family violence can be in the form of physical, sexual, verbal, psychological, financial and emotional abuse. The majority of victims are women. Typically, this violence escalates, and as we know, many women lose their lives in Australia each year at the hands of their current or estranged partners. Children also suffer greatly in these situations. According to a recent study, children who witness domestic violence are impacted in the same way as if the violence was committed against them. They carry this trauma throughout their lives, which has a massive impact in our community. I believe every level of government has a role to play in addressing this issue. I commend the Mayor for bringing this motion to Council today, and I look forward to the development of a bold and innovative strategy. This is obviously a complex issue with no easy solution. However, there are things that can be done. By providing understanding and support to any of our own staff who are impacted, by raising awareness in the community, and by collaborating with other organisations who are already working in this space, I believe we can and should provide leadership on this critical issue. I therefore offer my enthusiastic and wholehearted support for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stosenchek. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Acting Chair, Deputy Mayor. I just rise to support the motion, naturally enough, and commend the Mayor for bringing the motion to the table and look forward to the strategy also. Removing the stigma of family violence is something that I think is very important, and for the Council to provide that leadership in our community is vital. It's not always easy for a private company, even other government departments, to provide that lead in being able to not just talk about and discuss and raise this issue, but to develop strategies and to develop policy that enables, as Councillor Stosenchek said, most often women, the opportunity to be able to take matters into their own hands in leaving a dangerous situation. And if that means encouraging other employers to provide domestic violence leave, which not every employee has access to, then I think that this is a very important move by the Council. It's an opportunity for us to sing it from the rooftops and to remove that stigma in society, to let people know there's no embarrassment, there's no shame in asking for help in that matter, because it's only then that people feel comfortable, either financially, psychologically or emotionally, to come forward and to seek that help. And that's what we need more than anything else. So I commend the motion and the Mayor for bringing this forward, and I look forward to that robust discussion in our community across the broad employment in our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. A question from Councillor Mackenzie.
Just to the CEO, I'm just querying, do we have anything in our staff policies in regard to domestic violence or anything similar to what the Mayor is putting forward? I'm just conscious of not duplicating what we've already got, so I just wouldn't mind testing his memory of our staff manual.
No, in terms of the Council's response to this matter, clearly our enterprise agreement, and this is the provision in our enterprise agreement around the access to family violence leave, so that all employees across City of Launceston are able to access that if in need. But no, in terms of a council policy, it's obviously there's no staff related or staff identified policy. This is more a community based policy that the Mayor is seeking for the Council to develop, and we haven't got anything like that at present.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll speak. I just wanted to clarify where we stood with it. So I read this and look, it's an extremely emotive issue, domestic and family violence, and it is something that communities all around the world are dealing with, unfortunately, because I personally can't understand how it happens, but I know it does. It just doesn't sort of work in my wavelength, but the reality of it is there is significant, and I know that people who are in abusive situations find it very difficult to leave for all sorts of reasons, and looking for that level of support that they need to maybe break that measure is something that's important. So I think any organisation that can support a motion to do something that is actually going to improve somebody's circumstance, or potentially improve somebody's circumstance, or give them somewhere where they may be able to go to enable them to escape a situation like this, and also to be able to utilise something like this as an educative process to ensure that people out there who maybe come from abusive relationships don't end up being abusers themselves as they go forward in life. So, certainly in some of the areas I do work, I have seen evidence of all of this sort of stuff, and it's a very tragic circumstance and can lead to the ultimate sacrifice somebody makes by losing their life. So I think the sentiment of what the Mayor has put forward is something that we as a community, we as a council group should support in general, well, not general, specifically. So I'm very comfortable to support the motion, just making sure we wrap it around in a holistic way, and that a consequence of what we do, we don't accidentally miss something, or we don't actually misinterpret something in regards to what we're doing. So it's a very sensitive issue which needs to be sensitively dealt with and very carefully crafted how we deal with our strategy. But I'll support today.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Mayor, do you wish to close?
Only to say thank you for the comments that have been raised, and yes, it is sensitive, but it's still important, and it's something that I think it's very a matter of fact that as a council we should be taking the lead, and we should be prepared to take the lead and be strong, and this is really for getting that strategy, and then from that a lot of things will flow. So it's not going to be a financial burden on our council, but it's going to be something that's going to have a lot of benefit to many people in our community, so I commend it to the council.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll take the vote. All those in favour? That's carried by all 10 councillors present. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy. On 17.1, City of Launceston Cultural Strategy, move Deputy Mayor. Seconded, Councillor Mackenzie. Wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mayor. Well, it may be the General Manager of Art and Culture's birthday, but I believe it is indeed the city's turn to celebrate today, because after a 4-year journey, that's had its ups and its downs, we are at that point where we seek to endorse our city's inaugural cultural strategy for the next 10 years. I think it's really exciting today that we take that bold direction and that bold emphasis of what local government in this modern time is all about. It's about roads, it's about rubbish, but it's also about people. It's about sustainability, it's about vibrancy, it's about placemaking, it's about diversity, it's about heritage, it's about tourism, it's about so many things that are encapsulated in our city's first inaugural cultural strategy. Obviously, the documented path to see us arrive here is clearly contained within the report and also within the document itself. But what I want to speak about is the way that we've engaged with our community along the way, not just with artists and performers, but also with people from the tourism sector, from people from the education sector, from people from the food and wine sectors, from people involved in the cultural sector themselves, but in the broadest possible sense. And I think this is the exciting thing about a strategy such as this. It's not about just having the nice to-dos, about having a theatre or having a program of dance or poetry in your city, but it's about valuing for the very first time via this strategy the strengths that come from the return that's possible when a city has a vibrant, diverse cultural sector. You heard me in a previous item reference the fact that the state has a cultural and creative industry sector, and you also document a strategy for the sector, and you also heard me reference the way that our document overlays so perfectly with what the state is doing. Like people around this table, I know people who work in this sector who are choosing to make Launceston their home, moving from interstate or in some instances from overseas. We should be really proud of the standard that already exists within the creative and cultural services sector here in Launceston. But I believe through the 5 strategic focus areas that are contained within this strategy that the future, the 10-year future and indeed beyond, is something that will be even more exciting. So I referenced the 5 strategic focus areas in the strategy, all of which have the opportunity to continue to transform our city and inform the decisions that we make. Those being valuing and respecting Aboriginal culture, realising the potential of our cultural places and assets, fostering creative practice, revealing our cultural stories and building and extending our partnerships. I also reference part 2 of the recommendation before us today that notes our intention to establish an implementation framework and cultural advisory committee once this strategy is endorsed today. In many respects, the work that will take place in our city with regard to the cultural sector is just beginning. But the journey to get here is the culmination of many people's vision and many people's hard work, and a community outside the council that is so passionate in advancing the strengths and the outcomes that can be achieved from a very dynamic and interconnected sector.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, like the Deputy Mayor, I think we should just celebrate just like we did when Hawthorn beat St Kilda a few years ago. The lovely, lovely display out at UTAS Stadium. Look, like the Deputy Mayor, I've done the journey with him through this cultural strategy with a number of people through that process. And I guess that, you know, there are some people who think 2017, when Robin Laurie started her engagement with us, to 2020 has been a long time, and we've had our critics about when. And at the end of the day, I think the beauty about this is the time that needs to be taken. And yes, we've gone up a couple of blind alleys before we've come back and recorrected ourselves to get to where we needed to get to. The fact, as the Deputy Mayor said, we've gone and communicated with our stakeholders, and I think it's been a really embracing of our stakeholder group. Some of those happened just as COVID were hitting, so we had to retrace and restart and do things like that. So there's been a number of sort of diversions as we've gone through there, but I think what we've ended up with is a fantastic document that actually leads the process of what we're going to do before. But the reality of it is, this is only a document. This isn't what we are. It gives a bit of a roadmap of where we've gone, where we're going to. But the reality of it is going to be the people of our community that are going to embrace this and make the cultural strategy the success that I know it will be. We have some fantastic resources with people, facilities, and everything else in the city that can deliver a fantastic outcome for the community that we live in, for all the people that live here, and moreover for all those people who come to visit. And I'm sure, based on COVID and what I'm seeing with regards to property purchases in and around Launceston, we're having a lot of people being drawn to this city and they want to make this place our home. And I know, as Councillor Gibson has said, there are a lot of people from the artistic background who have decided that this is the place they want to live, even if they work somewhere else, because they know their creative juices are stirred, and the passion of this city in relation to what it does with its arts and culture is something fantastic. I think the beauty of it is the breadth of what culture means. It's not just about going on stage and acting, it's not about singing, it's about food, it's about sport, it's about so many diverse things that a lot of people, if you asked them what culture was, wouldn't have anywhere near the number of strands to the cultural portrait that we've painted in this document. And I'm just so thrilled about where we'll go with this. And from an economic point of view, it makes sense as well, because I think it's the sort of thing that drives enthusiasm. It makes us a place to want to live. It makes us a place that people want to visit. So I truly endorse this.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I enthusiastically support and endorse the remarks of the previous two speakers, and just want to add a little bit to this. Back at the time of the last census, it tells us that there were 80,916 people that identified that lived in Launceston. And I reckon if we had a bit of a look at some of the lines on the map and included parts of Riverside and Prospect that are divided in a different council by what's happening on a different side of the road, and some other bits and pieces, we'd be up over that 100,000 mark. And the reason I highlight that, Mr Mayor, is that this city, greatest city, has that capacity with its size and what it has to be one of the leading cultural places in the country. And I think for mine, something that makes a community is its culture. And I'm really passionate about that. And interestingly, the people that perhaps appreciate the importance of this strategy in the conversations they've had with me, particularly in recent times, knowing this was coming here today, are people that by and large are new to Launceston, They're not necessarily people that have been born here, they're people that have travelled a lot. And sometimes, Mr Mayor, when you look around the world, and you come to a place like this, you realise what a special place it is. So in looking at this item today, the thing that I really, really like about it is that it's got a lifespan and it's a strategy for us to work to. It's not something that's ad hoc or something that sort of just things happen in a disjointed manner. As Councillor Gibson said, there has been a significant amount of work that's gone into what's before us today. There have been a number of people involved in various capacities, from councillors around this table and previous councillors through to staff who are here at the moment and others who aren't. But it's a rich document and it's got great integrity, and as others have said, it's just a very, very important thing for our city. I had a conversation with someone earlier this week who was excited that this was coming here today, and he said to me that the cultural strategy, in his words, is probably one of the most important things we'll deal with as a council, because like my earlier remarks, he recognises the importance of culture in a community and making it a special, special place. I think Councillor Gibson made the remark, and I 100% support it. Perhaps, you know, there's a mistaken thought out there that culture is, you know, just a performance or just a band playing or a play or whatever. Perhaps with something like this detailed document, we can tell that story, that culture is much more than those things. And it is spelled out very, very clearly on page 112 in the 5 focus areas within the strategy. I'll conclude my remarks by thanking all who've worked on making this get to us today. It's a momentous occasion, as the Deputy highlighted in his remarks and with his excitement. But, you know, this is something to me, with all the elements of it, that make this place a place that people live and love living and want to live and want to come here and live. And the fact that we've got it condensed into something that's been consulted on and put together, I think speaks volumes for this city and for the people that's been involved in its production. And I'm very, very proud to support it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Daking.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really briefly, I'd like to thank obviously those who've worked on this for quite a long time, and it's great to be able to, I suppose, riding on the coattails of it, and so really be blessed with the cultural strategy that we're going and acknowledging and moving forward with. I'd just like to acknowledge the staff for the great work, because I know there was a lot of community feedback, and it was great to see that that community feedback was actually received and acknowledged and taken on board. And I suppose I speak in particular of my line of interest in regards to our food culture. And it's been a great educating process, because as Councillor Mackenzie said, culture is just not arts, performance and life performance. It's culture is our people, and I think that we're really proud of our people. So again, it's exciting to see, and I look forward to obviously where our culture takes us in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do, likewise congratulate, everyone involved. It's been a long journey for the council. There's been quite a few iterations along the way to reach this point. It is a great thing. It's going to put the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of, different parts of the community have different, expectations as to what our culture is and what we should be investing in for now and for in the future. But this sets us on a great path forward. We're spoilt for choice, as pointed out by Councillor Mackenzie, that we have such a rich heritage and a rich legacy. We have, our sporting arenas. We have our wonderful arts community, whether it's drama or music or poetry, our storytellers. But in other ways, you can look at that culture and realise that most of it is what we would call European culture that we have celebrated There are not as many things that we can look at and distinctively say, oh, this is Tasmanian, or this is locally Launceston culture. Parts of our built heritage are like that, but again, it's from a European tradition. Parts of of course, our natural heritage are like that. Parts of our arts community are developing in that way. Certainly, in our sporting arena, when it comes to the wonderful game of Australian football, that is something that is a great part of our culture, and it's wonderful that we celebrate that in Launceston. All I would say is I would certainly encourage the development of our own unique culture in that way, and I would draw the attention of not just councillors but also, of course, our community to page 49 of the cultural strategy, where it does talk about the value and respect of Aboriginal culture. And of course, Aboriginal culture, Indigenous culture across Australia is the true culture that is irreplaceable, is of original significance when we talk about cultural practice, cultural heritage in this country. And I would make the point that, you know, whether it be sport, food, wine, heritage, arts, a lot of those areas, there too is an aspect of Aboriginal culture that entwines with all of those things, increasingly so. And that's a great thing to see. And the only other point I would make there, I would beseech people to remember that Aboriginal culture is not Aboriginal community. The two are not synonymous. So as a council, while we do engage in acknowledging, respecting and promoting Aboriginal culture, we don't use that as a default or an excuse for engaging with the Aboriginal community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, if you'll have the... You can do it just for a minute. It won't be long. I just want to add a few little things. I agree with all the comments that have been made, and I want to first of all thank the Deputy for his role that he's played up until now, including through the process. So thank you for your enthusiasm, commitment and willing to follow it through, but also to our staff, and I think there's many that have been involved. Thank you to the staff. But just to point out that this process is another great success story from our city deal. We should never lose sight of that. It is part of our city deal, and the city deal is the federal and the state government and us working together, which is extremely important for our city and something that's going to continue to benefit our city in many, many years ahead. So this is part of that process, which is important. And then I'm looking forward to step 2, which I know step 1 is now complete. We have the cultural strategy, but step 2, and it says there a timeline of 1 year, so there is a timeline on there, which is fantastic, to define actions and the processes, so which is important to establish implementation framework, establish cultural advisory committee, develop and prioritise actions for each theme, and allocate existing resources to prioritise the actions. And I think that's going to be exciting when we get to that stage. So in a year's time, before next Christmas, that's going to be exciting. So back to you, Deputy. Oh, back to me, that's right. Speakers, I'll get the Deputy to close. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the great contributions from everyone around the table. It's wonderful to reach this point with a sense of, I guess, unanimous support for what the strategy is, which is certainly appreciated and should be celebrated. There's no denying that this is a bold strategy, as it should be. We won't be judged as an organisation as to whether or not we have a cultural strategy or not. We'll be judged on how well we implement some of the strategy goals that are contained within it. And I believe the passion and the sense of team that has seen us arrive at this point, both within the organisation but importantly outside of it, will see that we will be able to realise many great things through the cultural strategy's life. This cultural strategy and the ones, Mayor, hopefully that will follow it. I would like to also reference the work of the staff, and there have been many, some of whom are not here, but the current CEO, who has really embraced what a cultural strategy could do for our city, sitting alongside those other important strategic documents. And it was the CEO before him, the General Manager, Robert Dobrinsky before him, that was convinced that a cultural strategy could bring so much to our city. I think even he at the time didn't realise the potential of what could be unpacked in a city, in a region that valued its cultural and creative industry sector. The staff from the senior level down to the consultant, Colin, and others who have worked to see us arrive at this journey, as well as councillors Mackenzie and Finlay and others around the table who have been involved during the process. We all celebrate the launch of the endorsement of the strategy today, and we look forward to the many great things that will come from it, the formal things, but also importantly the informal things that come from a city that is so strong when we value the people within the cultural and creative industries. So I commend this motion in endorsing our inaugural cultural strategy to the table.
Thank you, Deputy. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So, councillors, do you want a break or you want to continue on? Continue on? Continue on? Most want to continue on, I think. Okay, we'll keep going. 18.1, lease land at Cataract Gorge. Moved Councillor Harris. Seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Only briefly, this is the third term, this time of 5 years, for this particular lease of important infrastructure for mobile phone coverage in the Cataract Gorge. As someone commented on the bus today when we were at Underwood, that when you lose your mobile phone coverage, you do feel rather isolated, and so such things are very necessary for our modern life. And certainly I'm sure that people, if they were to go to the gorge, do enjoy the fact that they're able to connect to the internet, as well as have mobile phone coverage to receive calls to perhaps go and pick up children or otherwise from down there when the walk back up the hill all gets too much. So with that, I'll leave it and commend the motion to you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak?
Again, I think it's just a standard thing that we're doing here today. We've got a lease which actually has an extension, which we're now just extending. So I'm very happy with that.
Yes, if I could, I suppose the General Manager of Infrastructure, is it? Perhaps. I just know that there has been some pressure from other companies that provide mobile services to have some kind of access to a facility at the gorge where they could, place their tower, transmitter, receiver tower. Obviously, this is an agreement that was, struck quite a while ago. But is there any room for negotiation in terms of allowing other companies to have access in, what you'd say is a sensitive area, I suppose?
Thank you. Councillor.
Yep.
Jane? Or General Manager?
We have had that discussion with other telcos, and we understand that the current towers are at capacity.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you had a question, or was that? No. You want to speak? Yep. You next in line there. Yep.
I just wanted to say it's not particularly relevant to this topic, but it just feels like at the moment we've got, just briefly, because it's worth celebrating, it feels like we've really gone through all of our leases and all of the things, and that we're doing a lot of tidying up, and there's a lot more rigour and strength. And that is really appreciated, but also that ability to be able to transcend the legal jargon into accessibility for us. So I just wanted to note that, because recently there's been some great work with regard to our leases, and I think it's worthy of mention.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.1, some budget amendments. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie? Councillor Harris? Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.2, further budget amendments. Councillor McKenzie moves, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie? Noted. Councillor Harris? Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors at the table. That is carried. So 19.3, Councillor Soward moved, seconded Councillor McKenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward?
Just very briefly, thanks, Mr Mayor. Like the other two items, it is very self-explanatory, but I think it's well worth highlighting in our report that we approved a nation-leading community care and recovery package during April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this package included $40 million of accelerated capital works. So a really, really important thing, Mr Mayor, that this council did at the time of when things were starting to go crazy due to COVID-19. This program brings work forward, hence the title Accelerated, but it's us playing a significant part as an employer, as a huge organisation and a large council in doing our bit to stimulate the economy and create employment and obviously contribute strongly to the economic cycle. So I think it is worth making that point. Sometimes people might say, oh, well, now we're, in good times, the sun's shining, we're through the other side of it. What's council doing? Well, this is a living, breathing thing of what council is doing. $40 million, as I said, an accelerated capital works program. So it explains very clearly in there, Mr Mayor, the breakdown of that. It talks about the particular scope of works and so forth for those who will be interested in getting in and seeing the specifics. But for me, the really, really big thing is that we've brought this work forward and it will play a key role in providing employment and stimulus in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie? Thanks,
Mayor. Yeah, look, I endorse the comments made by Councillor Soward. Just want to be clearly, COVID has presented a lot of challenges for us this year. Not us alone, the state, the federal and everybody in our community has been adversely impacted. What I love is the council's almost first to do anything, and we've been really on top of that. I guess the key now is to be flexible in the way that we do this, and I mean this on the basis that when I go around I see that much stimulation that's being placed on the table from various levels of government and other places that you can't get a builder till next October. There's a lot of things going on, so I think we as a council just need to think that through to make sure that we're not overstimulating to the extent that we're actually paying more than we should be for the things that we are doing and actually having it over an extended period of time rather than sort of concentrating it in. I think we're there. Probably we can use ourselves to fill the gaps where we see there are issues within the community who are struggling, that we can use our accelerated program to really pinch hit and make sure that we hit the targets that we think need to be hit, rather than just going on with everybody else and doing the same thing that other government levels are doing and maybe paying more of a price than we should be for the services that we've got. So whilst I endorsed it all, I think it's just making sure that we're cognisant of all of those issues when we are going out to put tenders out for these things and noting what the heat of the market is and the issues and the things that we're doing it.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, question?
Yes, if I may, of the General Manager, about there's three projects that are listed to be cancelled: Windermere Road reconstruction, Urban Road reseal program and Kingsmeadow CBD road resurfacing. First question in regard to Windermere Road was, it's only $250,000, so I'm assuming that it wasn't the missing link of sealing the 1.2 kilometres of gravel, and just wondered what that road work was that we're no longer going to do, and will it be carried forward into future budgets? And the second one was about the Kingsmeadow CBD road resurfacing, again, just when that would be carried forward too.
General Manager Shane.
I'll have to take both of them on notice. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a take notice of what Councillor McKenzie said. He's spot on about the works projects. 40 million bucks we've got there for the capital works. But I think we should really slow it down because there's that much work out there. You've got no idea. I think we could drop it back a little bit and just do what Councillor McKenzie said. We've got to get the best value for the dollar. And at the moment, we're not going to because everyone's going to put the prices up. We've just got to be careful of it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward, wish to close?
All being said, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors at the table. That is carried. 19.4, delegation to council. Someone happy to move that? Councillor McKenzie moved. Is there a seconder, Deputy Mayor? Councillor McKenzie, wish to speak to it?
Again, I think that where we're giving these questions are all laid out in the table that's there, and it's good to see that our estimated remission in a couple of areas are actually less than what we predicted they would be. Am I on the wrong one? Have I got? Sorry, I jumped one. Have I? Oh. Anyway.
We've got 92 and 3. We'll do a 19.9.
No, you're an enthusiast.
I might rescind my move the motion. I was excited about the next one.
Yeah, 19.4 we're doing.
Sorry, I've skipped one.
So, did you still want to move it, Councillor McKenzie?
I'm happy for somebody else to, just on the basis of best.
We've got to have a mover first. Deputy Mayor has moved it now. Who's seconded it? Councillor Stodzenchik, thank you. A question, Councillor Walker.
Yes, if I could just get the CEO to explain the reasons why this was required or desired to have. I'm presuming that it's just an organisational matter, that it's just moving the powers of decision making from one level to another, but I'd be happy to hear that.
Thank you. CEO.
Oh yes, it's just an ongoing review of the delegations.
Short but sweet.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor, I should say, do you want to speak?
Just briefly, I think it's all set out there, and it's just something that we do periodically. Obviously, noting my interest in matters to do with drains, I would hope that the delegated powers ensure accurate and full record keeping of any matters pertaining to drainage items, as I'm sure is the case in our modern day organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Stodzenchik? No. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.5, remission of fees and charges. Move Councillor McKenzie. Second, Councillor Soward.
I'm doubly excited.
Oh, well done. You want to speak? Do you want to speak then, do you?
Speak on this matter here. And just noting that the matters are undertaken, and it's great to see that our emissions somewhat less than what we budgeted to go, which means that we needed less, which is always a good thing. You said that last time. But it wasn't efficient.
Councillor Soward.
Mayor, and I rise heartily to support this, and I'm glad that none of these got a bonus drain with their remission as well, just to save us some money. But in all seriousness, I think you yourself, Mr Mayor, in your report today touched on the junior soccer, how they mentioned that how the remission helped them. I think it's really, really important to note that we have so many clubs made up of volunteers, organisations made up of volunteers, that bit of remission, that bit of help, whilst a small figure on paper individually can make a world of difference to people and how they operate. And once again, through a very difficult time, this council stepped up, and it's not blowing trumpets and things like that. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that, because when we dealt with that package at the time that we had way back when, we noted how important it would be, the ripple effect that would have on people. And again, we only need to look at that table and not just see the figures are only part of the story, but to look at those headings and think, you know, what comes under that? Who will be affected? How many hundreds or even thousands of people have received some benefit to continue their activity, to go along and play sport, to be a part of the group that they belong to, that they enjoy being a part of. So I think it's fantastic. As Councillor Mackenzie said, it's a little bit less than we anticipated, but nonetheless, I have no doubt that remission and help would have helped people stay afloat, keep open, and bring some sanity to what was a very, very challenging time.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Deputy?
Just briefly, of course, notwithstanding the fact that we're looking at the financial implication, I think it is time to celebrate what was achieved in putting this package together. It showed what can happen when people work together, but also when we respond. And you know, I think someone said in a previous item, you know, we were one of the first. Well, we were the first. And the way that we were able to set an example within the sector here within Tasmania, but the way that we were able to be agile and nimble, and CIU should obviously take great credit in what you and the team did in putting that package together, because it was a huge amount of work in a very short amount of time that has had a very lasting impact on our community and touched so many points within the community as referenced in the culmination of the figures here. But also, I think, showed that we are an organisation that truly does care about its community. And I know that I was pretty proud to be part of our organisation at that time, as I'm sure everyone else around the table was. So looking at the financial implications and celebrating the fact that you know, there's a little win there, but also taking time to celebrate the larger implications of what we did.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
I will close, Mayor, because I think we should just also acknowledge your role in actually bringing the initial motion for these activities to take place. So I think that's certainly something we should acknowledge as well. But also, you know, I guess just going back to a previous item regarding our accelerated capital works, and I guess some of the reason why the market is so hot at the moment is because of the development application minimum fees that we remitted, which has actually brought a lot more development online, which has now meant there's a lot of private sector development going on as well. So I think that in itself is probably repaying itself, you know, tenfold in the community with the benefits that are going to many of the people who are employed in those services.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. What am I doing? Any other speakers? Oh, it's closing on. Oh, gee, I put the motion. That is carried by all councillors present. 19.6, that's what I was about to do. You move it as it is, Councillor Harris? Is seconded. Councillor Cox? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Only that this gives those, our representative, who is Councillor Dawkins, who's not here today, the guidance of when she sits at the LGAT general meeting next month as to how to vote on the various items that come along. So it's just formalising what we've already decided, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Just formalises the decision we made at the workshop, which is in writing.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 20.1, Design Tasmania request. Councillor Mackenzie moved. Deputy Mayor seconded. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I think if Councillor Dawkins were here, she would have loved to have moved this motion, and certainly very thankful for what the council has agreed to do, which if we approve this motion, to support the Design Centre, which is a pretty integral part of our cultural offering. And I note there's a lovely picture of the Design Centre in our, I think on page 25 of our cultural strategy. So I think it's just endorsing and noting the issues there, and clearly there are some substantive issues that probably we need to work on with the Design Centre going forward in regards to the stability of the building that houses the Gary Cleveland connections there. So I guess that's something that our infrastructure people are going to need to deal with, but I think this is a really appropriate measure at this time.
Thank you, Deputy.
Just briefly, I guess to follow on, I think that the tense would be are dealing with, and I think my conversations with Claire and the team from Design Tasmania is the way that Council has been engaging in that conversation has been appreciated. it's obviously an issue that is going to require an agile and adaptive response, but also one that, you know, we celebrate in terms of the part of the asset that's ours, and in the not too distant future when it all falls to us. And I think if Councillor Dawkins were to be here, she would reference the amazing way that that particular organisation is changing what it does, is evolving, is continuing to work with the community. And in terms of the way that they were engaged and spoke quite vocally with regard to our cultural strategy, it's a really important part of our branding and of what we see in our city. So I want to say thank you for the conversations that have been happening, for the way that our asset management team have been working, CO and others have been working with Design Tas. It's going to be a challenging time moving forward, and this assistance will obviously certainly help at the moment.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close?
No, Mayor.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. And I think that we get to the end of the meeting, so thank you for your time. The meeting is closed.